I never thought my driveway would become the most talked about feature in the entire Meadowbrook community. But there I was, standing in my garage doorway, staring at a certified letter from the Homeowners Association that demanded I rip out my brand new heated concrete system within 30 days. My name is Victor Ingram, and I had just spent the last 4 months planning and executing what I thought was a brilliant upgrade to my property. I am a structural engineer by trade, which means I know my way around construction permits, building codes, and most importantly, what makes sense for a home in Minnesota. When I purchased my house in Meadowbrook Estates 2 years ago, I knew I was signing up for HOA rules, but I had read through every single page of that covenant document. Nowhere, and I mean absolutely nowhere, did it say anything about restricting driveway improvements. The letter was signed by Barbara Hendricks, the HOA president, and it was full of the usual bureaucratic nonsense. According to her, my heated concrete driveway violated the aesthetic standards of the community and created an unfair precedent that could lead to chaos. I read it 3 times, trying to find any actual rule I had broken. There was nothing specific, just vague references to maintaining neighborhood uniformity. I walked back into my house where my girlfriend, Christina Reynolds, was making coffee. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, setting down the coffee pot. I handed her the letter without saying anything. Christina had been living with me for about 6 months now, and she knew all about the HOA drama that occasionally bubbled up in our neighborhood. She read through it quickly, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. "This is ridiculous," she said, slapping the paper down on the counter. "You got every permit. The city approved everything. What grounds does Barbara even have?" "None that I can see," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "But you know how she is. She thinks the HOA board runs a little kingdom here." Christina shook her head. "What are you going to do?" "Fight it," I said simply. "I am not ripping out a $20,000 driveway because Barbara does not like innovation." The heated concrete system I had installed was not some wild, experimental technology. It was a radiant heating system embedded in the concrete that kept my driveway and walkway free from ice and snow. For anyone who has lived through a Minnesota winter, you know how valuable that is. No more shoveling at 5 in the morning before work. No more salt destroying your concrete. No more slipping on ice. It was practical, energy efficient, and honestly, it looked exactly like every other driveway on the block because it was just concrete. That evening, I decided to walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. Meadowbrook Estates was a planned community of about 200 homes, all built within the last 10 years. The houses were nice, mostly 2-story colonials and craftsman-style homes with well-maintained lawns. The HOA was strict about lawn care, paint colors, and the usual suburban stuff. I had always followed the rules, even when I thought they were excessive. As I walked past my neighbor's house, I saw Dave Morton outside putting up Christmas lights. It was early November, but Dave liked to get a jump on things. "Hey, Victor," he called out. "How is that new driveway working out?" "Great," I said, walking over. "Actually, really great. I turned it on for the first time last week when we got that surprise snow, cleared right up." Dave climbed down from his ladder, genuinely interested. "No kidding. I was thinking about doing something like that. My back is killing me from all the shoveling last winter. You should talk to the guy who installed mine. He does great work." "I will definitely do that," Dave said. "What did it run you, if you do not mind me asking?" "About $20,000, but it will pay for itself in about 10 years with what I save on snow removal and salt." We chatted for a few more minutes before I continued my walk. I did not mention the HOA letter. I wanted to handle this quietly if possible. The next morning, I called the property management company that handled HOA matters for Meadowbrook. I got through to a representative named Susan, who sounded young and slightly overwhelmed. "Yes, Mr. Ingram, I have your file here," she said, typing away on her keyboard. "You are calling about the driveway violation." "It is not a violation," I corrected her. "That is why I am calling. Can you point me to the specific section of the HOA covenant that my driveway violates?" There was a long pause, more typing. "Well, it says here that the board determined your improvement violates Section 4.7 regarding external modifications." "I have Section 4.7 right in front of me," I said, flipping open my copy of the covenant. "It says that external modifications must maintain the aesthetic character of the neighborhood. My driveway looks identical to every other driveway. The heating elements are underneath. They are not visible. I understand your frustration, Mr. Ingram, but the board has made its decision." "Based on what? I need specific reasons, not vague interpretations." Susan sighed. "You have the right to appeal at the next board meeting. That is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, on November 28th. You would need to submit your appeal in writing by November 21st. I wrote down the dates. "Fine. I will be there." After hanging up, I spent the rest of my lunch break drafting an appeal letter. I outlined every permit I had obtained, included letters from the city building inspector confirming the work met all codes, and attached photos showing that the driveway looked completely normal. I even included information about property value increases from home improvements to show that this was beneficial to the entire community. Christina helped me proofread it that evening. "This is really thorough," she said, impressed. "If they deny this, it is pure spite." "That is what I am afraid of," I admitted. "Barbara has always been weird about stuff. Remember when the Johnsons painted their front door navy blue instead of black, and she tried to make them repaint it?" "That was insane," Christina agreed. "Though they did end up repainting just to avoid the hassle." "Well, I am not the Johnsons. This is not about door paint. This is a significant investment that improves my property and makes my life easier. I am not backing down." I submitted my appeal the next day via certified mail and email, making sure I had proof of delivery. Then I waited. During those 3 weeks, something interesting started happening. Neighbors began stopping by to ask about the heated driveway. Word had spread, probably because Dave Morton had a big mouth, and people were curious. I gave tours of the system, explaining how it worked and what it cost. By my count, at least 15 different neighbors expressed serious interest in installing their own systems. One of those neighbors was Patricia Vaughn, who lived 2 streets over. She was a retired teacher in her 70s who had fallen on her icy driveway the previous winter and broken her hip. "This would change my life," she told me, examining the control panel in my garage. "I have been terrified of winter ever since the fall. My daughter wants me to move to a retirement community, but I love my home." "You should absolutely get one," I encouraged her. "There are even systems designed specifically for people with mobility concerns. They can include the walkway and front steps too." Patricia's eyes lit up. "Really? Oh, that would be wonderful." By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, I had a list of 17 neighbors who wanted to install heated concrete systems. I brought that list with me to the meeting, along with a presentation I had prepared on my laptop. The meeting was held at the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. When I arrived at 7 o'clock, the parking lot was surprisingly full. Usually, HOA meetings drew maybe 10 people. Tonight, there had to be 40 or 50 residents there. Barbara Hendricks sat at the front table with the other 4 board members. Kenneth Wright, the vice president, Melissa Torres, the secretary, Gary Foster, the treasurer, and Jennifer Wu, a member at large. Barbara was exactly what you would picture when you hear HOA president. She was probably 55, with severely cut blonde hair that looked like she demanded to speak to the stylist's manager, pearl earrings, and a pantsuit that screamed middle management. She looked annoyed at the turnout. "This is a regular board meeting," she announced before we even started. "Not a town hall, we have a set agenda." I raised my hand. "My appeal is on the agenda, is it not?" She pursed her lips. "Yes, we will get to it." The meeting dragged through 20 minutes of financial reports and landscaping contract discussions. Finally, Barbara cleared her throat and said, "Now we will address the appeal from Victor Ingram regarding his unpermitted driveway modification." "It was permitted," I said immediately, standing up, "by the city. I have all the documentation." "Mr. Ingram, you will have your chance to speak," Barbara said icily. "First, I will explain the board's position. Your installation of a heated driveway system, while perhaps permitted by the city, was not approved by this board. All external modifications must be submitted to the HOA for approval before work begins. You failed to do that." I felt my jaw tighten. "The covenant does not require pre-approval for driveway repairs or replacements. Section 4.7 only requires that modifications maintain aesthetic character, which mine does." "We interpret Section 4.7 differently," Barbara said. "The board has the authority to interpret covenant provisions." "On what basis?" I challenged. "Show me the interpretation guidelines." "Show me any precedent." Barbara's face was turning red. "Mr. Ingram, your attitude is not helping your case." "My attitude." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "You are demanding I destroy a $20,000 home improvement based on a made-up interpretation of a vague rule." "I am asking for basic accountability." Kenneth Wright, the vice president, spoke up. He was a balding man in his 60s who usually just went along with whatever Barbara said. "Victor, the issue is that if we allow your heated driveway, we will have to allow everyone's, and that creates problems." "What problems?" I asked. "Safer driveways, less ice, fewer slip and fall injuries, cost problems," Barbara interjected. "Not everyone can afford what you installed. It creates economic disparity within the community." I stared at her in disbelief. "So because not everyone can afford an improvement, no one can have it. By that logic, nobody should be allowed to upgrade their kitchens or add pools or do anything that costs money." "Pools require HOA approval," Barbara shot back. "Because they are visible and impact the neighborhood aesthetically," I countered. "My driveway looks exactly like everyone else's. The only difference is that mine does not have snow on it." That is when Dave Morton stood up from the audience. "I want one," he announced. "I was going to install one next spring. Are you telling me I cannot?" Patricia Vaughn stood up too, slower because of her hip. "I need one for safety reasons. This cannot be against the rules." Suddenly, a dozen other people were standing, all voicing their interest in heated concrete. Barbara looked panicked. "Everyone sit down," she said loudly. "This is not a debate." "Actually, it is," said a voice from the back. A man I did not recognize walked forward. He was probably 40, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. "My name is Thomas Chen. I am an attorney representing several residents of this community. I have been asked to observe these proceedings." Barbara's face went pale. "We did not authorize legal representation." "You do not need to," Thomas said calmly. "Any resident can retain legal counsel. I am here to ensure that HOA procedures are followed correctly and that residents' rights are protected." I had no idea who had hired an attorney, but I was grateful. Thomas took a seat in the front row, and Barbara looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "Fine," she said tightly. "Let us put this to a vote. All in favor of upholding the violation notice against Victor Ingram." Barbara raised her hand. Kenneth hesitated, then raised his. That was it. Melissa, Gary, and Jennifer all kept their hands down. "The motion fails," Jennifer Wu said, checking her notes. 3 against, 2 in favor. The violation notice is rescinded. The room erupted in applause. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Barbara slammed her gavel on the table. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced, gathering her papers quickly. "Wait," Thomas Chen said, standing. "I would like to address the board about HOA procedures. Several residents have complained that violation notices are being issued without proper documentation or justification. This driveway situation is just one example. I am requesting that the board implement a formal review process for all violations that includes specific citations and an appeals process before any enforcement action is taken." Barbara looked furious. "We have an appeals process. Mr. Ingram used it." "After already receiving a violation notice demanding removal of the improvement," Thomas pointed out. "The process should come before the violation, not after. Residents should be able to submit plans for approval or disapproval before spending thousands of dollars." Gary Foster, the treasurer, nodded. "That actually makes sense, Barbara. It would save everyone time and money." Barbara gathered her things. "We will take it under advisement. Meeting adjourned." She practically ran out of the community center. I walked over to Thomas Chen. "Thank you for that," I said. "Can I ask who hired you?" "A group of concerned residents," he said with a smile. "They reached out after hearing about your situation. They have been dealing with similar issues. Barbara has been on a bit of a power trip lately." Over the next several days, I learned more about what had been happening. Barbara had issued violation notices to at least a dozen residents over the past year for minor issues like lawn ornaments, holiday decorations left up too long, and house numbers that were supposedly the wrong size. Most people just complied because fighting the HOA seemed too daunting. I had apparently been the breaking point. True to his word, Dave Morton had a heated concrete system installed in December. So did Patricia Vaughn. By the time spring rolled around, 11 homes in Meadowbrook Estates had installed heated driveways or walkways. The contractor I had used was thrilled with all the business. Barbara Hendricks resigned as HOA president in January. According to the rumor mill, she could not handle the criticism, and the fact that the board had started pushing back on her more aggressive enforcement ideas. Jennifer Wu took over as interim president and immediately implemented the review process that Thomas Chen had suggested. But that was not the end of the story. In March, I received a call from a man named Richard Paulson. He identified himself as an investigator with the Minnesota Attorney General's office. "Mr. Ingram, I am calling regarding Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," he said. "We have received several complaints and are conducting an investigation. I was hoping to ask you some questions." "Of course," I said, intrigued. "What kind of investigation?" "Financial improprieties," Richard said. "We received a tip that HOA funds may have been misappropriated. Your name came up as someone who had recently challenged the board. I wanted to get your perspective on how the HOA operates." I told him everything I knew, which honestly was not much. I explained the violation notice situation and the board meeting. Richard asked several questions about Barbara specifically and whether I had noticed any unusual spending or contracts. "Not that I saw," I admitted, "but I never really looked closely at the financial reports. They always seemed boring." Would you be willing to provide copies of any HOA correspondence you have received? Richard asked. Absolutely. I sent him everything I had, including the violation notice and my appeal. A few weeks later, the investigation became public. The local news reported that Barbara Hendricks was under investigation for embezzling HOA funds. Apparently, she had been approving inflated contracts with vendors who then kicked back a portion of the money to her. The landscaping contracts I had sat through at that board meeting. The company she had hired charged 3 times the market rate, and Barbara was getting cash payments under the table. The investigation revealed that over the past 4 years, Barbara had stolen nearly $60,000 from the HOA. The money was supposed to go toward community improvements, road maintenance, and the reserve fund. Instead, it had funded Barbara's lifestyle, including a boat and several expensive vacations. In May, Barbara was arrested and charged with theft and fraud. Kenneth Wright, who had been her loyal vice president, turned state's evidence and testified that he had known about some of the kickback schemes but had been too intimidated by Barbara to say anything. He was charged with lesser crimes and accepted a plea deal. The criminal proceedings moved surprisingly quickly. Barbara's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the Attorney General's office was not interested in going easy. By August, she went to trial. I was called as a witness, not about the financial crimes directly, but to testify about the HOA's patterns of behavior and enforcement. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution laid out a clear case of systematic theft. Barbara had set up the HOA to be essentially run by her alone, with a rubber stamp board that did not ask questions. She had used violation notices and fines to keep residents afraid and compliant while she looted the community funds. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional fines. Meadowbrook Estates had to undergo a complete overhaul after that. The property management company was fired for failing to catch the fraud. A new management company was hired with much stricter oversight. The entire HOA board was replaced through a special election. Jennifer Wu ran for president officially and won. She appointed Gary Foster, who had been one of the members who voted against my violation notice, as vice president. The new board's first major action was to update the HOA covenant with clear, specific rules about what required approval and what did not. Driveway improvements like heated concrete were explicitly permitted without pre-approval as long as city permits were obtained. The new covenant also included term limits for board members and required annual third-party audits of HOA finances. Christina and I got married that September. We held the reception at our house, and I made sure to tell everyone the story of how our heated driveway had inadvertently brought down a corrupt HOA president. It got a lot of laughs. By the following November, almost exactly a year after Barbara's violation notice, there were 23 heated concrete systems installed in Meadowbrook Estates. The neighborhood had become known for it. A local news station even did a feature story about how our community had embraced the technology after one resident's fight with the HOA led to uncovering major corruption. I was interviewed for the story, standing in my driveway on a snowy morning while the concrete underneath remained completely clear. "It is funny how things work out," I told the reporter. "I just wanted to not shovel snow. I never intended to become the guy who took down the HOA president." The reporter laughed. "Do you have any regrets?" "None," I said. "Well, maybe one. I wish I had done this sooner. This driveway is amazing." Dave Morton's house appeared in the background of the shot, his heated driveway also perfectly clear. He walked over and joined the interview. "Best decision I ever made," Dave said. "My back has never been better, and knowing that we helped clean up the HOA, that is just a bonus." The story aired during the evening news and got picked up by several national outlets. For a few weeks, I was getting calls from people all over the country asking about heated concrete and HOA corruption. I even got invited to speak at a conference about homeowners' rights. Patricia Vaughn, the elderly woman who had fallen on her icy driveway, sent me a thank you card that winter. Inside, she wrote about how her heated walkway had given her independence and confidence. She was no longer afraid of winter. Her daughter had stopped pressuring her to move to a retirement home. That card meant more to me than any news coverage. The contractor who had installed my system called me in December with an interesting proposition. He wanted to use my story in his marketing materials. In exchange, he would give me a referral fee for any new customers who came through me. I agreed, figuring that if I was already becoming known as the heated concrete guy, I might as well benefit from it. That arrangement ended up being surprisingly lucrative. Over the next year, I referred 43 installations, not just in Meadowbrook but in surrounding communities too. The referral fees essentially paid back the entire cost of my original installation plus extra, but the real satisfaction came from seeing the neighborhood change. The new HOA board was transparent and reasonable. Jennifer Wu held quarterly town halls where residents could voice concerns and ask questions. The financial audits were posted online for anyone to review. Violation notices became rare and, when issued, were always accompanied by specific rule citations and clear remediation steps. The community started to feel like an actual community instead of a place where everyone was afraid of breaking some unknown rule. People installed improvements on their homes without fear. There were more holiday decorations, more personalization, more life. We still had standards. They were just reasonable now. In February of the second year after my violation notice, I was shoveling some light snow off my front steps when a car pulled up. A woman I did not recognize got out and walked toward me. "Are you Victor Ingram?" she asked. "I am," I said, immediately wary. My mind jumped to another investigation or legal issue. She smiled. "I am Rachel Morrison. I live over in Sterling Heights, about 10 miles from here. Our HOA is a nightmare, and when I heard about what happened here, I had to come talk to you." I relaxed. "Oh, sure. What is going on?" Rachel explained that her HOA had many of the same problems Meadowbrook had experienced: overly aggressive enforcement, unclear rules, and a board that seemed more interested in control than community. She wanted advice on how to challenge them. "First thing," I said, "document everything. Every violation notice, every communication, every rule they cite. Second, read your covenant completely. Know it better than they do. Third, show up to meetings and bring other residents. They have less power when people are paying attention." We talked for about 30 minutes. I gave her Thomas Chen's contact information and the name of the new property management company Meadowbrook used. Before she left, she thanked me profusely. "You have no idea how hopeless it feels to fight an HOA," she said. Hearing that someone actually won gives me hope. After she drove away, Christina came outside with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Making new friends?" she asked, handing me a mug. "Something like that," I said. "Just helping someone who is in the same situation I was." She leaned against me. "You know, when you got that violation notice, I thought it was going to be a huge headache. I never imagined it would turn into this whole thing." "Me either," I admitted. "But I am glad it did. This place is so much better now. Thanks to you." "Thanks to a lot of people," I corrected. "I just did not want to rip out my driveway." We stood there in the cold, watching the snow fall. It was accumulating on the lawn and the street, but our driveway remained clear, the heated concrete doing its job perfectly. The legal aftermath continued for a while. Barbara Hendricks tried to appeal her conviction but lost. She ended up serving her full sentence. Kenneth Wright got probation and community service for his role in enabling the fraud. The HOA successfully sued both of them for damages, recovering most of the stolen money plus legal fees. That recovered money was put to good use. The new board used it to repave several streets that had been neglected, upgrade the community center, and build a playground that residents had been requesting for years. It felt like the neighborhood was healing. By the third year, the heated concrete story had mostly faded from public attention. I still got occasional calls from reporters or people looking for advice, but life had generally returned to normal. The big difference was that normal was now much better. Dave Morton and I had become good friends through all of this. We started a tradition of having a driveway party every first snowfall of winter, where anyone with a heated driveway would gather and enjoy watching the snow melt while drinking hot toddies. It was silly, but it brought people together. At one of those parties, Gary Foster, who was still serving as vice president of the HOA board, pulled me aside. "I want to apologize," he said. "I should have stood up to Barbara sooner. I knew something was off, but I convinced myself it was not my problem." "You voted against the violation notice," I reminded him. "That counted for something." "Yeah, but I could have done more before it got to that point. A lot of people got hurt by her stealing that money. The HOA was nearly insolvent when the fraud was discovered. If it had gone on much longer, we might have had to do a special assessment just to keep operating." "But you didn't," I said. "And you have been part of making things right. That matters." Gary nodded, looking relieved. "Thanks, Victor, and thanks for not backing down. You saved this neighborhood." I did not think I had saved anything. I just refused to let someone take away something I had legally installed and paid for, but I understood what he meant. Sometimes standing up for yourself ends up helping a lot of other people too. Christina got pregnant that spring. We were both excited and terrified. As we started preparing for the baby, we talked about whether we wanted to stay in Meadowbrook or move. "This is a great place to raise kids now," Christina said. "Good schools, safe neighborhood, and the HOA is not insane anymore." "True," I agreed. "But kids are expensive. We might need a bigger house eventually." "Let us cross that bridge when we come to it," she said. "Right now, I want to stay here. This is home." Our daughter, Emma, was born in December, right around the same time I had received that violation notice 3 years earlier. As I held her in the hospital, I thought about how much had changed. A simple home improvement had led to uncovering corruption, reforming an entire HOA, making new friends, and becoming an accidental activist for homeowners' rights. When we brought Emma home, the neighborhood threw us a welcome party. Patricia Vaughn knitted her a blanket. Dave Morton and his wife brought over enough casseroles to last a month. Jennifer Wu gave us a gift certificate for a cleaning service to help during those first exhausting weeks. It was overwhelming in the best way. That winter was particularly harsh. Minnesota got hammered with storm after storm, and we had record snowfall, but my heated driveway performed flawlessly. Every morning, while the rest of the street was buried, our driveway was clear. It was especially appreciated now that we had a newborn. The last thing I needed was to slip on ice while carrying Emma to the car. More neighbors installed systems that year. By the time spring arrived, nearly half the homes in Meadowbrook Estates had heated concrete. It had become one of the defining features of our community. Real estate agents mentioned it in listings. Property values had gone up, partly because of the heated driveways and partly because of the HOA reforms that made the neighborhood desirable again. I ran into Richard Paulson, the investigator from the Attorney General's office, at a coffee shop in April. He was grabbing coffee before work, and we ended up chatting for a few minutes. The Meadowbrook case became a model for how we investigate HOA fraud now, he told me. Your willingness to speak up and provide documentation was crucial. We have used similar approaches in 3 other cases since then. Glad I could help, I said. I hope you get all the corrupt HOA presidents, he laughed. We are trying. There are more than you would think. HOAs handle a lot of money, and oversight is often minimal. It is a recipe for problems. Well, if you ever need a witness or someone to explain why homeowners should not be afraid to push back, let me know. I might take you up on that, Richard said. As Emma grew, I realized that one of the best things about the whole experience was the lesson it taught about standing up for what is right. I wanted her to grow up knowing that authorities, even small ones like HOA boards, are not infallible. That rules should make sense and be applied fairly. That sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in, even when it seems easier to just go along. On the 4th anniversary of the violation notice, I was outside with Emma, teaching her to ride her little tricycle on the driveway. She was 2.5 and utterly fearless. Christina was inside working from home, pregnant with our 2nd child. Jennifer Wu walked by with her dog and stopped to chat. Hard to believe it has been 4 years, she said, watching Emma pedal around. Time flies, I agreed. How are things with the HOA? Smooth, she said. Boring, even. Which is exactly how it should be. We have not had a major dispute in over a year. People submit their improvement plans. We review them according to clear guidelines, and that is it. Revolutionary concept, right? We both laughed. Are you going to run for another term? I asked. She was up for re-election in a few months. I think so, Jennifer said. I actually enjoy it now that it is about community building instead of petty enforcement. We are working on putting together a neighborhood festival for this summer. Nothing fancy, just food trucks and music in the park. That sounds great, I said. Let me know if you need volunteers. After she left, I thought about how completely the neighborhood had transformed. The HOA that had once been an adversary was now a genuine asset. It maintained common areas, organized community events, and enforced reasonable standards that actually preserved property values and quality of life. The heated driveway, meanwhile, just kept working. I had the system serviced annually, and the technician always told me it was in perfect shape. The investment had paid for itself multiple times over, not just in snow removal costs, but in time saved and stress reduced. On cold winter mornings, when I would have been outside scraping ice off the driveway before work, I was instead inside having breakfast with my family. Other communities started reaching out, asking how Meadowbrook had implemented its reforms. Jennifer and the board created a template that other HOAs could use, complete with updated covenant language, oversight procedures, and enforcement guidelines. It was shared freely with anyone who asked. I spoke at a few HOA reform conferences over the years, always telling the same basic story. I wanted to improve my property. The HOA tried to stop me with vague rules and arbitrary enforcement. I pushed back, which exposed deeper corruption. The community rallied, reforms were implemented, and everyone ended up better off. The message was simple. Homeowners have rights, HOAs have limits, and transparency matters. 5 years after that initial violation notice, on a cold November evening, I was in my garage when Barbara Hendricks's name popped up in a news alert on my phone. She had been released from prison after serving her sentence. The article mentioned that she had relocated to Arizona and was working as a cashier at a grocery store. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated that she had faced consequences. Part of me felt sad that someone had made such destructive choices. Mostly, I felt grateful that her reign over Meadowbrook was long over. Christina came out to the garage bundled up against the cold. "Did you see the news about Barbara?" she asked. "Just now," I said. "Weird to think about her being out. Do you think she ever regretted it?" "I hope so," I said. "But honestly, I do not spend much time thinking about her anymore. She is not part of our lives." "True," Christina agreed. "We won, she lost. Story over." But it really was not just about winning and losing. It was about building something better. The Meadowbrook Estates of today was a place where people wanted to live, where the HOA served the community instead of controlling it, where neighbors looked out for each other. That winter, we had 47 homes with heated concrete systems. The contractor I had originally used had opened a second location just to handle all the business from our area. He credited me with launching his expansion and sent us a very generous gift basket when our son, Aaron, was born in January. Emma, now 3, loved watching the snow fall on the driveway and then melt away. She thought it was magic. In a way, I guess it was. Magic born from engineering and perseverance. Dave Morton and I were sitting in my garage one Saturday afternoon, watching our kids play in the cleared driveway while snow fell around them. We had both installed small heaters in our garages, so even with the doors open, it was comfortable. "You ever regret the fight?" Dave asked. "Not once," I said. "You? Hell no. This is the best money I ever spent. My only regret is not doing it sooner." "You could not have done it sooner," I pointed out. "Barbara would have shut you down too." "True. Guess we needed someone stubborn enough to fight her." "I prefer to think of it as principled," I said with a grin. Dave laughed. "Sure, let us go with that." We watched the kids for a while, enjoying the simple pleasure of a snow day without any of the usual hassle. This was what it had all been about. Not winning an argument or exposing corruption, though those things mattered. It was about making life a little bit easier, a little bit better, for myself and my family. The heated concrete was just concrete with some pipes underneath. But it represented something larger. The idea that homeowners should be able to improve their properties in reasonable ways without arbitrary interference. That HOAs should serve communities, not rule them. That standing up to unreasonable demands was worth the effort. As Emma and Aaron grew up in Meadowbrook Estates, they would know none of the drama that had come before. They would just know a neighborhood with clear driveways in winter, a fair HOA, and parents who taught them to stand up for what was right. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Christina and I sat in the living room. Through the front window, we could see our driveway, clear and dry despite the continuing snowfall. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had just given in?" Christina asked. "If you had removed the driveway like Barbara demanded?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "I think I would have regretted it forever, not just the money, but knowing I had let someone push me around for no good reason." "You did the right thing," she said, "even if it was hard." "It was worth it," I said. "All of it." And it was. The heated concrete driveway that had started everything still worked perfectly, melting snow and ice with quiet efficiency. The HOA that had tried to make me remove it was now well run and reasonable. The neighborhood that had been quietly suffering under corrupt leadership was now thriving. Sometimes the smallest stands lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes refusing to back down from one unreasonable demand can expose much larger problems. Sometimes a simple home improvement can become a catalyst for community transformation. My heated concrete was just pipes and concrete and electrical work. But it had become a symbol of homeowners' rights, of transparency in governance, of communities coming together to demand better. Every winter, when the first snow fell, I would walk out to my garage and flip the switch that activated the heating system. And every time, I would smile, remembering the day Barbara Hendricks had told me to rip it all out. She had wanted me to remove my heated concrete, to back down, to accept her arbitrary authority. Instead, I had fought back and in doing so had helped transform an entire community. And the next year, just like every year since, dozens of my neighbors had heating systems of their own.